The next 2 days passed in a blur that Daewon hadn't expected. He'd planned to keep his distance, just show up for the party and then leave. But Nari had other ideas. She found him at his ship the morning after their first meeting, bouncing with excitement. "You have to help me pick out Mommy's present," she announced, grabbing his hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Don't you already have a present?" Daewon asked, but he was already letting her pull him along. "I made her a card," Nari said proudly, "but I want to get her something special too. Something real." They ended up in the station's hydroponics bay, a massive greenhouse that supplied fresh food to Harmony 7's residents. Nari led him through rows of vegetables and fruits until they reached a section dedicated to decorative plants. "Mommy loves flowers," Nari explained, running her fingers gently over colorful petals. "Daddy used to bring her flowers from every planet he visited. She still has them all dried and pressed in a book." Daewon's chest tightened at the image. "That's beautiful. I want to get her something Daddy never could," Nari said seriously. "Something new. Something that says we can have new beautiful things too." They spent an hour searching before Nari found it, a small plant with silver leaves and tiny blue flowers that bloomed in spiral patterns. The gardener explained it was from a newly discovered world, rare and expensive. "I don't have enough credits," Nari said, her shoulders slumping as she checked her small savings account. Daewon looked at the price, then at Nari's disappointed face. Before he could talk himself out of it, he pulled out his own credit chip. "I'll cover the difference. Consider it my gift too." Nari's eyes went wide. "Really? But it's so expensive." "It's fine," Daewon said, completing the transaction. "Your mom sounds like she deserves something special." Nari hugged the plant carefully as they left, chattering about how surprised Gia would be. As they walked back through the station, she suddenly asked, "Do you know about Volani birthday traditions?" "Can't say I do." "We have to decorate with colors that mean things," Nari explained. "Blue for wisdom, purple for family, gold for hope. And we make traditional foods and we tell stories about the person's life. It's supposed to celebrate who they are." "Sounds nice," Daewon said. "Will you help me decorate?" Nari asked hopefully. "Mommy will be at work all day tomorrow, so we can surprise her." Daewon should have said no. He should have maintained his boundaries, but somehow he found himself saying yes again. That evening, Gia invited him to dinner at their quarters. It was a modest space, clean and organized, but obviously lived in. Pictures covered one wall, mostly of Nari at various ages, but a few showed a handsome human man with a bright smile. Nari's father. "His name was Taesung," Gia said, noticing Daewon looking at the photos. "He had this crazy dream of mapping every habitable world in the sector. He made it to 47 before the accident." Daewon finished gently. Gia nodded, stirring the pot on the stove. "He was studying a volcanic world. There was an eruption. His team tried to evacuate, but the ship malfunctioned. By the time rescue arrived, it was too late." "I'm sorry." "Me too," Gia said softly, "but he died doing what he loved. There's some comfort in that." Dinner was a mix of human and Volani cuisine. Gia was an excellent cook, and the conversation flowed easily. Daewon found himself talking about his own wife, sharing stories he hadn't told anyone in years. "Her name was Hye-jin," he said. "She was a navigator. Best in the fleet. We were transporting medical supplies when our ship got caught in a debris field. She stayed at the controls to save the cargo while I evacuated the crew. The ship broke apart before she could get to the escape pod." Nari reached across the table and took his hand. "That's very sad." "It is," Daewon agreed. "But she saved a lot of lives that day. The medical supplies we were carrying ended up stopping an epidemic on a colony world." Gia met his eyes across the table. "She sounds like she was brave." She was. "Bravest person I ever knew." After dinner, Nari insisted on teaching Daewon some Volani phrases for the party. They sat on the floor while she patiently corrected his pronunciation, giggling every time he got it wrong. "You sound like you're trying to speak with rocks in your mouth," she laughed. "Maybe I am," Daewon said, making exaggerated chewing motions that sent Nari into fits of giggles. Gia watched them from the couch, a small smile on her face. When Nari finally went to bed, she and Daewon sat together in comfortable silence. "Thank you," Gia said eventually, "for being kind to her, to us." "You don't have to thank me." "I do, though," Gia insisted. "You don't know how hard it's been. Most people on this station treat us like we're invisible. Or worse, they treat us like we're problems to be solved. Hybrids aren't common, and some people think they shouldn't exist at all. Daewon felt anger flash through him. That's ridiculous. It's reality, Gia said with a sad smile. Nari gets bullied at school. Other parents don't want their children playing with her. And She trailed off, looking down at her hands. I've learned to be alone. It's easier than being disappointed. I understand that, Daewon said quietly. After Heejin died, I stopped trying to connect with people. It hurt too much. Still does most days. They sat in the quiet, two lonely people who understood each other's pain. Finally, Gia spoke again. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really agree to come to my birthday party? You could have walked away after Nari's first request. Daewon thought about it. Honestly, I saw myself in her. That desperation to fix something that's broken. To make someone happy again. After Heejin died, I wished someone could have done that for me. Gia's eyes glistened. You're a good person. I'm trying to be, Daewon said. Your wife would want that. My wife would want that too. The next day, Daewon helped Nari decorate their quarters while Gia worked late at the lab. They hung blue and purple streamers, arranged golden flowers, and set up a small table for gifts. Nari directed everything with the seriousness of a military commander. The blue has to be higher, she insisted. It represents Mommy's wisdom. Yes, ma'am, Daewon said, adjusting the streamers. As they worked, Nari chatted about her mother. Mommy used to smile more before. When Daddy was alive, she would laugh all the time. I remember a little bit. How she only smiles when she thinks she has to. People change when they lose someone, Daewon said gently. It doesn't mean they don't still have happiness inside. Sometimes it just takes time to find it again. Is that what happened to you? Daewon paused in hanging a decoration. Yeah, I guess it is. Are you finding your happiness again? Nari asked, her large eyes fixed on him. The question caught him off guard. Was he? 3 days ago, he would have said no without hesitation. But now, standing in this small quarters decorated for a birthday party, helping a little girl try to make her mother smile, he wasn't sure. Maybe, he said finally. Maybe I am. They were finishing the decorations when Daewon noticed something odd. Through the window, he saw someone watching their quarters from across the corridor. The figure moved away quickly when Daewon looked up. Nari, has anyone been asking you questions lately? About your mom or her work? Nari tilted her head, thinking. There were some people last week. They said they were interested in Mommy's research. They asked me what she studies. What did you tell them? Nothing, Nari said proudly. Mommy told me never to talk to strangers about her work. She says it's important and secret. A cold feeling settled in Daewon's stomach. He'd spent enough years in military service to recognize when something was wrong. Good girl. Don't talk to anyone about it, okay? Later that evening, he went to Gia's lab. She was still working, hunched over her desk with tired eyes. Have you noticed anyone unusual around the research center? He asked without preamble. Gia looked up, startled. What do you mean? I saw someone watching your quarters today, and Nari mentioned people asking her about your research. Gia's expression shifted from confusion to concern. There have been some unauthorized access attempts on my files. I reported it to security, but they said it was probably just system glitches. That doesn't sound like a glitch to me, Daewon said. What exactly are you working on? Gia hesitated, then pulled up her research data. I've been studying the genetic markers that make humans so adaptable. It's not just behavioral. There are actual biological changes that occur when humans face extreme stress. They develop new neural pathways, enhanced problem-solving abilities, increased resilience. And that's valuable? Very, Gia admitted. If someone could replicate or weaponize that adaptability, they could create soldiers who never break, workers who never quit, colonists who can survive anywhere. The military applications alone would be worth billions. Daewon's concern deepened. You need better security. I have security protocols. I mean real security. Someone watching your back, Gia met his eyes. Are you volunteering? For the next few days at least, Daewon said. Until I know you and Nari are safe. Something warm passed between them. Gia smiled. Thank you again. What are friends for? Daewon said, returning the smile. As he left the lab, Daewon couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was coming. He just hoped they'd have time to enjoy one birthday party before everything fell apart. Daewon sat alone in the corner of the cantina, staring at his half-empty glass. The liquid inside had gone warm an hour ago, but he didn't care. He'd been sitting in this same spot for 3 nights in a row, ever since his cargo ship had docked at Harmony 7 Station. The place smelled like oil and recycled air, and the lights flickered every few minutes. It was perfect for someone who wanted to be left alone. 3 years had passed since the accident. 3 years since he'd lost her. Most days, Daewon could push the memories down and focus on his work. He would haul cargo from one station to another, sleep in his cramped ship and avoid thinking too much. But nights like these, sitting in dingy cantinas on forgotten stations, the loneliness crept back in like cold water. He didn't notice the little girl at first. She'd been standing near the entrance for several minutes, working up the courage to approach him. Her lavender skin caught the flickering light, and the small crystalline horns on her head sparkled faintly. She clutched something against her chest, a piece of paper that looked handmade. When Daewon finally looked up, he found her standing right next to his table. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her large eyes stared at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Can I help you?" he asked, trying to sound gentle despite his rough mood. The girl didn't answer immediately. She just kept staring as if she was trying to read his soul. Then very quietly she said, "You smile sad." Daewon blinked. "What? You smile sad," she repeated. "Like my mommy does. When she thinks I'm not looking, she smiles sad too." He didn't know what to say to that. The girl shifted from foot to foot, still clutching her paper. Up close, Daewon could see she was a hybrid, part human, part something else. Her features were delicate, and there was something human in her expressions. But her coloring and those small horns marked her as different. "I've been watching you," the girl admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "for 3 days. Every night you come here and sit alone, just like Mommy does at home." "That's kinda creepy, kid," Daewon said. But there was no anger in his voice. He was more curious than anything. The girl's eyes filled with tears suddenly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be creepy. I need help, please." Something in Daewon's chest tightened. He recognized that desperation. He'd felt it himself many times over the past 3 years. "What kind of help?" She thrust the paper toward him. "Please come to my mommy's birthday party." Daewon took the paper carefully. It was a hand-drawn invitation, colorful and messy in the way only a child's artwork could be. There were flowers and stars drawn around the edges, and in the center, written in careful letters, were the words, "Please come to Mommy's birthday. 3 days from now. Our home, level 15, section C47. "I don't understand," Daewon said slowly. "Why are you inviting me? I don't even know your mother." The tears spilled over then, running down the girl's lavender cheeks. "Because she's so lonely. And I don't want her to be lonely anymore. It's her birthday and she won't have anyone there except me. She never has anyone." "What about her friends? Her co-workers?" "She doesn't really have friends," the girl said sadly. "The other scientists are nice sometimes, but they don't really like her. Because she's Villani, and they don't like me because I'm half human and half Villani. The other kids say I'm weird." Daewon felt his throat tighten. He looked at this little girl, tears streaming down her face, begging a stranger to come to her mother's birthday party. It was absurd. It was heartbreaking. "Kid, my name is Nari," she interrupted. "And my mommy's name is Gia, please. I know it's weird to ask a stranger, but you seem nice. And you're sad like she is. Maybe you could understand." "Understand what?" "What it's like to be alone even when you're surrounded by people." The words hit Daewon harder than he expected. This 7-year-old child had just described exactly how he'd felt for 3 years. He looked down at the invitation again, at the careful handwriting and cheerful drawings that tried so hard to be happy. "Nari, listen," he started, trying to find the right words to let her down gently. "I appreciate this, but I don't think your mother would want some random guy showing up to her birthday. She doesn't know me." "Then meet her first," Nari said quickly, her face brightening with hope. "Just meet her. Talk to her. Then you can decide, please? I promise she's nice. She's the nicest person in the whole galaxy." Daewon sighed. He should say no. This was crazy. He should finish his drink, go back to his ship, and forget this conversation ever happened. In 2 days, he'd be gone from this station anyway, hauling his next load of cargo to some other forgotten corner of space. But those eyes. Those desperate, hopeful eyes that reminded him so much of his own reflection. "Where does she work?" he heard himself ask, Nari's face lit up like a star-going supernova. The Xenobiology Research Center. Level 12. She's there every day until late. She studies humans and how they adapt to different environments. She thinks humans are amazing. She does? Yes. She says humans can survive anywhere, no matter how hard it gets. She says they never give up, even when everything is terrible. She studied that with my daddy before he died. There it was. The real reason behind Nari's sadness. Her father was gone too. This little girl and her mother were both grieving, both lonely, both trying to survive in a universe that seemed determined to keep them isolated. Daewon closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about his own wife, about the promises he'd made to be kind, to help people when he could, to not let grief turn him into something cold and empty. Okay, he said finally. Okay? Nari's voice was filled with disbelief. Okay, I'll meet your mother tomorrow at the research center, but I'm not promising anything about the party. I'll meet her, we'll talk, and then we'll see, deal? Nari threw her arms around him before he could react. The hug was fierce and desperate and full of hope. When she pulled back, she was smiling so wide it made Daewon's heart ache. Thank you. Thank you so much. You won't regret it, I promise. Mommy is wonderful and she makes the best food and she knows everything about everything and… Whoa, slow down, Daewon said. But he was smiling despite himself. A real smile, not the sad kind Nari had noticed. One step at a time, okay? Okay, Nari said, bouncing on her toes. Tomorrow. Level 12, the Xenobiology Center. Her office is the one with the human flowers in the window. She grows them herself because they remind her of Daddy. Before Daewon could respond, Nari turned and ran toward the exit. At the doorway, she stopped and looked back at him one more time. Thank you for being nice, she called out. Most people aren't nice to us. Then she was gone, leaving Daewon alone with his warm drink and a hand-drawn invitation. He looked down at the paper again, tracing the carefully drawn flowers with his finger. What am I doing? He muttered to himself, but deep down he already knew. He was doing what his wife would have wanted him to do. He was helping a lonely child and her lonely mother because he understood exactly what they were going through. And maybe, just maybe, they could help him too. The birthday party started better than Gia had expected. She'd come home from work to find her quarters transformed with decorations, her daughter beaming with pride, and Daewon standing awkwardly in the corner, like he wasn't sure he belonged there. Surprise, Nari shouted, throwing her arms wide. Happy birthday, Mommy? Gia's eyes filled with tears. Blue and purple streamers hung from the ceiling. Golden flowers sat on every surface, and the smell of her favorite foods filled the air. Nari, this is beautiful. Did you do all this? Daewon helped, Nari said proudly. He hung all the high decorations because I couldn't reach. Gia looked at Daewon, who shrugged with a small smile. I was just following orders. Your daughter is very particular about decoration placement. Thank you, Gia said softly, and she meant it for more than just the decorations. A few of Gia's colleagues arrived, 3 scientists who were friendly enough, though not exactly close friends. They brought small gifts and seemed genuinely surprised to see Daewon there. I didn't know you were seeing someone, one of them said to Gia. We're just friends, Gia said quickly, but she felt her face flush. Daewon helped serve food while Nari flitted between guests like a social butterfly. The apartment felt warm and alive in a way it hadn't in years. Gia caught herself laughing at something Daewon said, and realized it was a real laugh, not the polite kind she usually used. When it was time for cake, Nari insisted everyone gather around. She'd made the cake herself with Daewon's help that afternoon, and it was lopsided and covered in too much frosting, but perfect in its imperfection. Make a wish, Mommy, Nari said, her eyes shining. Gia closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't wish for the past to come back. Instead, she wished for the strength to build something new. When she opened her eyes, Daewon was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. After the cake, Nari presented her gifts. First, the handmade card, covered in drawings and heartfelt words that made Gia cry. Then the silver-leafed plant with its spiral blue flowers. Nari, this is too expensive, Gia protested, but she was already cradling it carefully. Daewon helped, Nari admitted. He said you deserve something special. Gia looked at Daewon over her daughter's head. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, he said simply. Before Gia could respond, Nari climbed onto a chair, demanding everyone's attention. I have one more thing to say. The room quieted. Nari looked at her mother with complete seriousness. Mommy, I know you're still sad about Daddy. I'm sad too. But I think maybe we can be happy again. Not the same happy, but a new happy. And I think Daewon can help us with that. Nari. Gia started, embarrassed. I wished for a family. Nari continued. A real family. And I think maybe my wish is coming true. The room fell into an awkward silence. Gia didn't know what to say. Daewon looked equally stunned. The other guests shifted uncomfortably. Then everything went wrong. The door exploded inward with a blast of energy. Gia screamed and pulled Nari close. Through the smoke came 5 figures in tactical gear, weapons drawn. The leader was a Korthan, tall reptilian with cold yellow eyes. Nobody move, the Korthan said in accented English. We're only here for the research data. Cooperate and nobody gets hurt. Gia's colleagues immediately raised their hands, but Daewon moved. In one fluid motion, he shoved Gia and Nari behind the couch and grabbed the nearest heavy object, a decorative vase. He threw it at the nearest mercenary, hitting them square in the face. Run, Daewon shouted. The Korthan leader aimed his weapon at Daewon. Stupid human. Stand down or die. I've heard that before, Daewon said and dove behind the kitchen counter as energy blasts scorched the air where he'd been standing. Gia's mind raced. The research data was stored in her lab, but she kept a backup drive hidden in their quarters, in Nari's room inside her favorite stuffed animal. The mercenaries must know about it. Give us the data, the Korthan leader demanded, advancing into the room. We know you have a copy here. Save everyone the trouble and hand it over. Never, Gia said, her voice shaking but firm. Her people didn't surrender their research easily. It was considered sacred knowledge. The leader smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Then we'll tear this place apart until we find it. 2 mercenaries moved toward the bedrooms. Daewon threw another object, this time a chair, tripping one of them. He was weaponless and outnumbered, but his military training kicked in. He was calculating angles, exits, possibilities. Gia, he called out. The ventilation shaft in Nari's room. How big is it? Gia understood immediately. Big enough for a child. Get ready to move. Daewon grabbed the small fire extinguisher from the kitchen wall and activated it, spraying foam across the room. In the chaos, he pulled Gia and Nari toward the bedrooms. The backup drive, Gia whispered urgently. It's in Nari's stuffed bear. Get it and destroy it, Daewon said.
Don't let them have it. Energy blasts cut through the foam.
The mercenaries were advancing. Daewon shoved a heavy dresser in front of the bedroom door, buying them seconds. Gia ran to Nari's bed and grabbed the worn teddy bear. She tore it open, pulled out the tiny data drive and crushed it under her heel. The device sparked and died. They're going to kill us, one of Gia's colleagues sobbed from the living room. The bedroom door shuddered as the mercenaries tried to force it open. Daewon was already at the ventilation shaft pulling off the cover. Nari first, go. I'm scared, Nari whimpered. I know, sweetheart, Gia said, lifting her daughter to the opening. But you're brave like your daddy was. Crawl through and find help. Can you do that? Nari nodded, tears streaming down her face. She crawled into the shaft and disappeared into the darkness. You next, Daewon said to Gia. What about you? I'll hold them off and follow. Like hell you will, Gia said. Despite never having trained for combat, her Vellani instincts were kicking in. Her people might be scientists, but they were also survivors. We fight together or we die together. The door burst open. Mercenaries flooded in. But Gia had already grabbed a container of chemical compounds from her emergency kit, substances she used for her research. She threw it at the nearest attacker. The compound hit his armor and began eating through it, causing him to scream and retreat. You have combat training? Daewon asked, surprised. All Vellani scientists do, Gia said, grabbing another container. We protect our research. They worked together, using the cramped room to their advantage. Daewon fought with brutal efficiency, using furniture as weapons and shields. Gia used her chemical knowledge, creating makeshift weapons from household items. But there were too many mercenaries. The Korthan leader finally cornered them, weapon aimed directly at Gia's head. Enough, he snarled. The data is destroyed, but you still have value. Your knowledge is in your head. You're coming with us. No, Daewon said flatly. You have no choice. Human. There's always a choice, Daewon said. and hit the emergency decompression button he'd noticed on the wall earlier. Alarms blared. The window shields began to retract. The Corthan's eyes widened in understanding. Day One was threatening to blow them all into space. You're insane.
You'll kill us all!
Maybe, Day One said calmly. But humans are good at survival. Are you willing to bet your life that you're better? It was a bluff. The station's safety systems would prevent actual decompression. But the mercenaries didn't know that. The Corthan leader hesitated, and that moment of uncertainty was enough. Station security finally arrived, alerted by Nari, who had crawled through the vents and found help. The mercenaries found themselves surrounded. The Corthan leader lowered his weapon slowly. This isn't over. Yeah, it is, Day One said. The mercenaries were arrested. Jia's colleagues were shaken but unharmed. The birthday party was definitely over. As station security took statements, Jia held Nari close. The little girl was crying, her perfect party ruined. The decorations were destroyed, the cake trampled, the gifts scattered across the floor. I'm sorry, Nari sobbed. I just wanted you to have a nice birthday. Jia kissed her daughter's forehead. You gave me the best gift anyone could ask for. You saved us by being brave. Daewon sat down heavily, adrenaline wearing off. His hands were shaking slightly. Jia reached over and took one of them. Thank you, she said. You could have run. You could have saved yourself. I couldn't do that, Daewon said, squeezing her hand. Not to you, not to Nari. In the wreckage of the party, surrounded by broken decorations and spilled food, something had shifted between them. They'd fought together, protected each other, survived together. This is crazy, Jia said softly. Yeah, Daewon agreed. Completely crazy. But neither of them let go of the other's hand. A security officer approached them. Dr. Jia, we have reason to believe this isn't over. The mercenaries won't talk, but we found evidence they're working for a larger organization. You and your daughter may still be in danger. What do we do? Jia asked. Daewon stood up, still holding her hand. You come with me. My ship is fast and well armed. We leave the station until this blows over. I can't just leave my work. Your work almost got you killed, Daewon pointed out. Right now, staying alive is more important. Jia looked at her daughter, then at their destroyed home, then at Daewon. In 3 days, this man had gone from stranger to friend to protector. Daewon found the Xenobiology Research Center easily enough. Level 12 was cleaner than most parts of the station, with white walls and bright lights that didn't flicker. Scientists in lab coats moved through the corridors with purpose, carrying tablets and discussing their work in hushed voices. He felt out of place in his worn cargo hauler's jacket and scuffed boots. The flowers in the window were exactly where Nari had said they would be. Real flowers, not the synthetic kind most people used in space stations. They were small purple blooms that Daewon didn't recognize, growing in a carefully tended pot on the windowsill of a corner office. He stood outside the door for a full minute, wondering if he should just turn around and leave. This was insane. What was he supposed to say? Hi, your daughter invited me to your birthday party because we're both sad and lonely. That would go over well. Before he could decide, the door opened. A woman stood in the doorway, and for a moment Daewon forgot how to breathe. Jia was beautiful. Her skin had the same lavender hue as Nari's, smooth and luminous in the fluorescent light. She was tall and slender, with long dark hair that fell past her shoulders. But it was her eyes that caught him, large and expressive, filled with intelligence and a deep sadness that mirrored his own. She stared at him in confusion. Can I help you? Daewon cleared his throat. I'm looking for Jia. That's me, she said, her confusion deepening. Do we have a meeting scheduled? I don't remember. Mommy! Nari's voice rang out from inside the office. The little girl appeared behind her mother, grinning from ear to ear. He came, I told you he would come. Jia's expression shifted from confusion to horror as understanding dawned. She spun around to face her daughter. Nari, what did you do? I invited him to your birthday party, Nari said proudly. And he said he'd meet you first, so I told him where you work, and now he's here. You... Jia pressed her hands to her face. When she looked back at Daewon, her cheeks had darkened to a deeper purple. I am so sorry. My daughter has an active imagination, and she doesn't always understand boundaries. I had no idea she was bothering strangers. She wasn't bothering me, Daewon said quickly. Well, not much anyway. Jia didn't seem to hear him. She was already pulling Nari aside, speaking to her in a low, urgent voice. "Nari, we talked about this. You cannot invite random people to our home. It's dangerous and inappropriate but he's nice." Nari protested. "And he's lonely like you." "I could tell." "That's not the point. Can I say something?" Daewon interrupted. Both mother and daughter turned to look at him. He took a breath. "Look, I know this is weird. Trust me, I think it's weird too. But your daughter asked me very nicely, and I agreed to at least meet you before making any decisions about the party. So here I am, meeting you." Gia opened her mouth, then closed it again. She looked at Nari, then back at Daewon. "You're serious? You actually came here because a 7-year-old asked you to come to a birthday party?" "Apparently I did, yeah." For a moment nobody spoke. Then to Daewon's surprise, Gia laughed. It was a short, disbelieving laugh, but it transformed her face completely. The sadness retreated, and for just a second she looked younger and lighter. "That is possibly the strangest thing that's happened to me this year," she said. "And I work with alien biology. I'm a cargo hauler who just got recruited by a 2nd grader," Daewon said with a shrug. "Strange is becoming normal." Gia studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Would you like to come in? The least I can do is offer you tea after my daughter ambushed you." The office was small but organized. Books and data tablets covered every surface, along with various plant samples in sealed containers. The human flowers in the window filled the space with a delicate scent. Nari bounced around excitedly while Gia prepared tea using a small heating unit in the corner. "I really am sorry about this," Gia said as she handed Daewon a cup. "Nari has been struggling lately. She wants things to be like they were before." "Before?" Daewon asked gently. Gia's expression grew distant. "Before her father died. 5 years ago now. He was an explorer, a human who loved discovering new worlds. He died on an expedition when Nari was 2. She barely remembers him, but she knows other children have fathers and she doesn't." "I'm sorry," Daewon said, and he meant it. "That must be incredibly hard." "It is," Gia admitted. She sat down across from him, cradling her own cup. "But we manage. We have each other. Mommy's birthday is in 2 days. Nari chimed in, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "She's going to be 34, Nari." Gia's face flushed again. Daewon smiled. "Happy early birthday." "Thank you," Gia said quietly. She looked at him with curiosity. "You're a cargo hauler? What brings you to Harmony 7? Just passing through?" "I haul supplies and equipment between stations. Not exciting work, but it pays the bills. And you're here alone." The question was innocent, but it hit deep. Daewon took a sip of his tea before answering. "Yeah, alone. My wife, she died 3 years ago. Accident in deep space. Ever since then, it's just been me and my ship." Understanding flashed in Gia's eyes. "I'm sorry. That's terrible." "It is what it is," Daewon said, using the same phrase he'd repeated countless times. "You learn to keep moving." They sat in silence for a moment, both understanding the weight of loss that sat between them. Nari looked from one adult to the other, her expression hopeful. "You both get it," Nari said softly. "You both know what it's like." Gia reached over and stroked her daughter's hair. "Sweetheart, that doesn't mean, can I show him your research?" Nari interrupted, jumping up. "Please? He should see the cool stuff you do." "Nari, I'm sure he's not interested in—" "Actually, I am," Daewon said, surprising himself. "What kind of research do you do?" Gia hesitated, then stood up and moved to her desk. She activated a holographic display that showed complex genetic sequences. "I study human adaptation to extreme environments, how humans modify their behavior, biology, and psychology to survive in conditions that should kill them." Daewon leaned forward, intrigued. "And what have you found?" Gia's eyes lit up as she began to explain. Her passion for her work was obvious, and Daewon found himself genuinely fascinated. She showed him data from dozens of human colonies, pointing out patterns in genetic expression and behavioral modification. "Humans are remarkable," she said, manipulating the hologram to show different graphs. "Most species, when faced with impossible odds, either adapt slowly over generations or they die out. But humans, they change themselves rapidly. They refuse to give up. They find solutions where none should exist. That's why Mommy loved Daddy," Nari added, "because he was like that. He would go places nobody else could go." Gia smiled sadly. "Your father was certainly stubborn enough to survive anywhere." As Gia continued to explain her research, Daewon found himself asking questions. Real questions, not just polite ones. He noticed problems with some of her equipment, old models that could be easily upgraded. As an engineer, he couldn't help but offer suggestions. If you redirected the power flow here, he said, pointing to a schematic, you could increase efficiency by at least 20%. Gia blinked. Could you really do that? Sure, it's basic engineering. I could probably fix it in an hour if you have the right tools. I have tools, Nari said excitedly. Can you fix it now, please? Daewon looked at Gia, who was watching him with a mixture of surprise and interest. I mean, if you want. I don't have anywhere else to be. That would be incredibly helpful, actually, Gia said. I've been meaning to get someone from engineering to look at it for months, but they're always too busy. So Daewon stayed. He fixed the equipment while Gia assisted, handing him tools and discussing her work. Nari sat nearby, drawing pictures and chattering happily. The hours passed without any of them noticing. It was late evening when Daewon finally finished. The equipment hummed to life, running smoother than it had in years. Gia ran a test sequence and gasped at the results. This is incredible. The data processing speed is 3 times faster. Glad I could help, Daewon said, wiping his hands on a rag. Gia turned to him, her expression serious. Thank you, really, you didn't have to do this. I know, Daewon said. But I wanted to. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, a connection neither had expected to find. So, Nari said, breaking the silence. Will you come to the party? Daewon looked at the little girl, then at her mother. Gia didn't say anything, but there was hope in her eyes now. Careful hope, like she was afraid to want this too much. Yeah, Daewon said finally. Yeah, I'll come to the party. As a friend, though. No pretending or anything like that, just as someone who understands, Nari squealed and hugged him again. Gia smiled, and it was the first truly happy smile he'd seen from her. As a friend, Gia agreed. That sounds perfect. Getting to Daewon's ship should have been simple. The docking bay was only 3 levels down from Gia's quarters. But as they hurried through the corridors with their hastily packed bags, Daewon spotted figures in tactical gear near the main elevators. They're already looking for us, he muttered, pulling Gia and Nari into a side corridor. We need another route. The service tunnels, Gia said quickly. I use them sometimes to move equipment between labs. They connect to the lower levels. Can you navigate them? I think so. They ducked into a maintenance access point, entering a world of pipes and conduits that ran beneath the station's polished surface. The tunnels were dark and cramped, lit only by emergency lights that cast everything in red. Nari clutched her mother's hand tightly, trying to be brave. Why are they still after us? Gia asked as they moved through the narrow passages. I destroyed the data drive. You're the data now, Daewon said grimly. Everything you know about human adaptation is in your head. They probably want to kidnap you and force you to recreate your research. That's awful, Nari said in a small voice. That's business, Daewon replied. Bad people see everything as something to steal or sell. They navigated the tunnels for 20 minutes, taking turns based on Gia's memory of the station layout. But as they approached a junction, Daewon heard voices ahead. He held up a hand, signaling silence. 2 mercenaries stood at the intersection, checking their scanners. She has to come through here eventually, one said. The captain wants them alive, but if the human causes trouble, we can drop him. Daewon looked around quickly. They couldn't go back. More mercenaries would be coming from that direction. Forward was blocked. That left only one option. Can you climb? He whispered to Gia, pointing up at the maintenance ladder that led to an upper level. With Nari, yes. Good. Go up 2 levels, then take the access tunnel east. It should bring you out near the cargo bays. My ship is in Bay 7. Access code is 4728. What about you? Gia asked, fear in her eyes. I'm going to give them something to chase, Daewon said. He pulled off his jacket and handed it to her. Take this. Get to the ship and start the launch sequence. I'll catch up. Daewon, no. Gia, listen to me, he said firmly but gently. Those men will kill me without hesitation, but they need you alive. If we split up, you and Nari have a better chance. Trust me. Gia wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She took the jacket with shaking hands. Don't you dare die. Not planning on it, Daewon said with a slight smile. Then he kissed her forehead quickly, surprising both of them. Now go, fast. Gia and Nari climbed the ladder silently. As soon as they were clear, Daewon grabbed a piece of metal pipe and threw it down the corridor in the opposite direction. The mercenaries heard the clang and immediately moved toward the sound. Daewon ran. He led them on a chase through the lower levels using every trick he knew. He knocked over equipment to create obstacles, triggered fire alarms to cause confusion, and used his knowledge of ship engineering to navigate through areas the mercenaries didn't expect. Meanwhile, Gia and Nari moved through the upper tunnels. Gia's heart pounded as she tried to remember the correct path. Nari was quiet and focused, climbing carefully behind her mother. "Mommy, do you think Daewon will be okay?" Nari whispered. "I hope so, baby," Gia said, though she was terrified for him. In just a few days, this man had become important to them in ways she hadn't expected. They emerged from the access tunnel into a cargo corridor. Bay 7 was visible at the end of the hallway, but so were two more mercenaries standing guard near the entrance. Gia's mind raced. She was a scientist, not a fighter, but she had Nari to protect. She looked around desperately and spotted a control panel for the cargo loading system. "Nari, stay here and stay quiet," she instructed. "What are you going to do? Something smart, I hope." Gia accessed the control panel, grateful for her security clearance at the research center. The cargo loading systems were automated, huge mechanical arms designed to move shipping containers. She programmed a rapid movement sequence and set it to activate in 30 seconds. Then she stepped out into the corridor. "There she is," one of the mercenaries shouted. Gia ran toward Bay 7, letting them chase her. The mercenaries followed, weapons raised. Behind them, the cargo loading arms activated, swinging massive containers into the corridor. The mercenaries had to dive for cover to avoid being crushed. Gia didn't stop running. She reached Bay 7, punched in the access code Daewon had given her, and pulled Nari inside. The bay was massive, filled with various ships. Daewon's cargo vessel was easy to spot, smaller than most, but sleek and well-maintained. "How do we get in?" Nari asked. Gia looked at the ship's entry pad. She didn't have the code, but she did have Daewon's jacket. She searched the pockets and found a security chip. "Thank you," she whispered, sliding it into the reader. The ship's hatch opened. They rushed inside just as the bay doors burst open behind them. The mercenaries had gotten past the cargo system. "Seal the hatch," Gia shouted to the ship's computer. "Voice authorization required," the computer replied calmly. "Emergency override. Owner is in danger." Override denied. "Please provide proper authorization." Damn it. Gia looked around the cockpit frantically. She'd never piloted a ship before. She was a scientist, not a pilot. But she'd watched Tae-sung fly countless times. She understood the principles, at least. Nari climbed into the co-pilot seat. "Mommy, look!" She pointed at a labeled switch. "Emergency launch." Outside, the mercenaries were trying to force the hatch open. Gia made a decision. She flipped the emergency launch switch. Alarms blared. The ship's engines roared to life. "Warning," the computer announced. "Emergency launch initiated without proper clearance. Station defenses may activate." "I'll take that risk," Gia muttered, gripping the controls. The ship lurched upward, breaking free from its moorings. The bay doors were still closed, but the emergency protocols were designed for exactly this situation. Ships needed to escape during station emergencies. The doors began to open slowly. Too slowly. Come on," Gia urged. The mercenaries were firing at the ship now, but the hull shielded them. The bay doors opened wider. Gia pushed the throttle forward, and the ship shot through the gap with inches to spare. They were out. Free from the station. But Gia had no idea how to actually fly the ship properly, and worse, they'd left Daewon behind. Back on the station, Daewon was running out of options. He'd led the mercenaries through half the lower levels, but there were too many of them. They'd cornered him in a dead-end corridor near the waste processing facility. "End of the line, human," the Corthan leader said, weapon raised. "Your friends abandoned you." The ship just launched. Daewon felt relief flood through him. Gia and Nari were safe. That was what mattered. "Good, they're smarter than me." Any last words? Daewon looked at the waste processing controls next to him. "Yeah, you should have worn environmental suits." He smashed the control panel with his elbow. The waste processing system, which normally disposed of trash through controlled decompression, went haywire. Alarms screamed. Emergency bulkheads began to close. "What did you do?" the Corthan demanded. "Made a mess," Daewon said, and dove through a maintenance hatch as toxic waste gases began flooding the corridor. He crawled through the tight space, barely able to breathe until he reached another access point. When he emerged, he was in the secondary docking bay, where smaller emergency shuttles were kept. Station security was everywhere now, responding to all the alarms Daewon had triggered. In the chaos, he slipped into a maintenance worker's uniform he found in a locker and walked calmly toward a shuttle. "Hey, you," a security guard called. "This area is restricted." "Emergency repair team," Daewon lied, showing a random ID badge he'd grabbed. "Got to check the shuttle systems after all these alerts." The guard looked uncertain but nodded. Everyone was confused about what was happening. Daewon climbed into the shuttle, locked the door, and initiated launch. It was a violation of every regulation, but he was way past caring about rules. He needed to get to Gia and Nari. The shuttle systems were basic, but he knew how to fly. He punched in coordinates for deep space and launched, ignoring the station's demands to return. He activated the ship's scanner, searching for Daewon's cargo vessel. There, several thousand kilometers ahead, moving erratically. Gia was trying to pilot without experience. "Cargo ship designation Swift Runner, this is Shuttle Alpha 4, do you copy?" he broadcast. Gia's voice came through, filled with relief and panic. "Daewon." "Oh, thank God. I don't know what I'm doing. The ship is bucking like a wild animal and I can't—" "It's okay, take a breath," Daewon said calmly. "You're doing great. Just tell me what's on your control panel." For the next hour, he talked Gia through basic piloting while pursuing them in the shuttle. She was a quick learner, and her scientific mind grasped the principles rapidly. By the time he caught up with them, she'd managed to stabilize the ship. The shuttle docked with the cargo vessel. Daewon entered through the airlock to find Nari throwing herself at him in a fierce hug. "You're alive," she cried. "Told you I'd catch up," Daewon said, hugging her back. Gia stood at the controls, her face showing exhaustion and relief. Daewon walked over and pulled her into his arms without thinking.